but I always get annoyed by my period. I've had my period for over 30 years. I've never wanted children, not a moment, not a flicker. I'm sure a lot of you have got kids and you're having a great time with them, and that's smashing for you. It's not for me. It's not for me at all. The best way I can describe how annoyed I get every time my period starts is like this. Imagine you've got a friend at work. She's called Deborah. She's great. Deborah's got a rabbit hutch, and every month she cleans it out. Puts fresh bedding in, fresh water in the water bottle, fresh food in the food bowl. Looks spotless, amazing, spick and span. And you say to her, Deborah, are you ever going to get a rabbit? And she goes, nah, I fucking hate them. That's what periods are to me. I feel like I'm making up the guest bedroom for a visitor that will ruin my fucking life. Enjoy your new baby, madam. I do also have very heavy periods. Not today, not any danger in the front row there. I wouldn't do that to you. Do have very heavy periods. You know the old saying, it's like trying to get blood out of a stone? I think they should update that. I think it now should be, it's like trying to get blood out of a mattress topper. In a hotel. To have very heavy periods. I feel like at the beginning of my period, it's quite tricky to explain this. At the beginning of my period, it's a little bit like my arse is in competition. Well, some of you already know what I mean. That's good, that's helpful. It's a little bit like my arse is going, oh, are we having a big clear out? I'll have a big clear out as well if that's all right. Period, nothing could shock me. Nothing could shock me. If I turned around, looked down that toilet, there was a dead rat just floating, I'd be like, sure, makes sense. The cast of The Walking Dead just climbing out. The girl off the ring popping up over the side. Sometimes I look down that toilet, it looks like the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. I did say there would be some upsetting scenes. But I feel like the pre-sex routine, the preparation before sex, if you like, it's very different for men as it is for women. For example, the first thing I do is I put my sex glasses on. They're varifocals. So I can see what's going on, what's coming. Maybe I try an activity. A friend of mine told me her and a partner tried a bit of role play where they pretended they'd never met before to make it a bit sexier. We've done a version of that. We sometimes pretend we're people who aren't tired. And he pretends I'm a woman who shaved her legs. I spend proper time on the preparation, or proper time. One of the first things I do is I hack it back. Some of you know what I mean, some of you aren't so sure. If you're not sure what I mean, I'm sure you've seen a nature documentary where somebody has to clear a path with a machete. It's a bit like that. Can't always see what I'm doing down there. There's lots of boobs and bellies in the way. Sometimes I set up a complicated system of mirrors. Most I just do it by feel. And they say childbirth is painful, and I'm sure it is, but it can't be as bad as nipping a lip in your craft scissors. Even now, whenever I trim the fat off bacon, I get flashbacks. I don't trim the fat off bacon. I treat my pre-sex routine like I'm trying to sell a house. Clear away excess foliage, Febreze the soft furnishings, familiar bread smell, yeast. It's different for blokes though, isn't it? In my limited experience, straight men just wash their cocks, that's it. It's just, not even always all of it, sometimes just the end part. Of course, some of them have to wash all the chalk off. And I said to my husband, I said, horses do more than you. He said, what? I said, horses do more than you. It's true, I've got a friend, she's got a horse. Her horse has a special lady who comes out just to wash his knob. I mean, how do you get into that? And by that, I don't mean, how do you get into that? Also, how at the end of your tether as a careers advisor are you before you slam shut your folder and go, how are you a horse's cocks? It's done for medical reasons, it's done for health reasons. They do it because they have to clear out what are called smeg beans, which are exactly what you think they are. But don't they also sound a little bit like something you could get from IKEA? I only went in for a nest of tables, came out with a massive bag of smeg beans. I was trying to explain to my husband what they were, and I sort of nervously Googled it. You know, Google has a habit of finishing the rest of the search for you. And I typed in smeg beans, and Google went, smeg beans grinder. And I was like, how bad are they? Like, you have to grind them off. And then I realised it's a posh coffee machine, isn't it? Smeg beans grinder. Oh. Also explains why John Lewis had it in 4 different colours. But I had a smear test before the first lockdown. Not like my friend had to have one during the lockdown. She had awful trouble getting her fanny at the right angle for the Zoom meeting. And she had, as she told me, she'd let herself flourish down there. That's her words, not mine. She'd let herself flourish. She said in order for them to see anything at all, she had to use a couple of scrunchies. I was very lucky. I had mine before the first lockdown. Give me a woo if you've had a smear test in the last 3 years. We're all very proud of ourselves, as should be. It's very important. I made an appointment at the doctor's, went along to the doctor's surgery, went into the nurse's room. She pulled the curtain round, told me to get undressed. All very normal so far. I took off my trainers, my socks, my jeans, my knickers. There was a flicker of a second where I forgot where I was. I was quite tired that day. And I also took off my top and my bra. And I thought, I'm going to have to really quickly put these back on again, or she's going to whip this curtain back and think it's a date. But as I was putting my top and my bra back on, she shouted over the top of the curtain, what size speculum are you? And I thought, am I supposed to know that? I've got a horrible feeling it's one of my security questions at the bank. So I never know the answers to them either. I think we're all fairly worldly wise in this room here tonight, but if anybody genuinely doesn't know what a speculum is, the best way I could describe it to you, it's basically a car jack, but for fannies. It's very much that bit. It's not the bit where they go in with a spoon. It's not a spoon, is it? She asked me what size spoon I was. I'd be like, I'd like to think a table, but I've got a horrible feeling I'm a ladle. I didn't know what size speculum I was. I texted my husband because I thought he's been down there a bit. He might have an idea. He just sent back a picture of 3 of his fingers. Or 2 if you're a Polish handyman. But after the smear test was over, I went into the reception area. The lady on reception, as soon as she saw me approach, she said, well done. And I thought that was lovely. And I said as much. I said, thanks so much for saying that. I said, we all worry about these appointments, but they're over in seconds. They're only really a bit uncomfortable, and they're so important. But I said, I was worried about it, but I'm glad I've been. Thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot to me. She said, what do you think I said? I said, you said, well done. She said, I said, all done. Ah, shit! So I picked up my lolly and my sticker, and I fucked off. But you know, we're all getting older. I turned 39 this year. I'm not worried about turning 40 next year. I'm not worried about getting older at all. And I think that's because I have good friends in their 40s, 50s, 60s. My parents are sort of late 60s, early 70s. And they all seem to be having quite a nice time. What I see as my future is not a scary one. My parents have this thing that I think happens to a lot of people when they retire. Is all of a sudden they can see their friends a lot more often. They can do hobbies they've never had time for. And they're so busy, they think to themselves, how on earth did we fit work in? Which must be a lovely state of affairs, mustn't it? My mum was showing us her diary because she said it was chock-a-block. She said, look at this. She said, we were going to go and see Oliver the Musical that day, but we can't because we forgot we had Swan Lake booked in at the Empire. She's only this tall. She looked up at me with this face that I adore, and she went, I haven't got time to die. I said, I don't think that's how it works, Mum. Just the Grim Reaper standing behind, and she's going, I can't do October. I can't do November. I want to see Tony Bennett in November. The Grim Reaper's like, Tony Bennett, I've been after him for years. But for the last 16 or maybe even 17 years, my mum and dad's annual holiday has been 1 week in Edinburgh. They love this city, they have friends there, they go, they have a smashing time, they come home, all good. But for some unknown reason, 2 years ago, they decided to book a cruise. And I said to me, Mum, that's very adventurous. What made you book a cruise? And she said, we just saw them loads on the telly. And I said, yeah, Mum, I'm pretty sure that was the news. They were running aground and people were dying. And my mum and dad are like, that looks lovely, sure we'll do that. My parents-in-law have a similar joy for life. They have a real knack for being able to turn a bad situation into a good one. I think it's something we could really learn from, all of us, I think. I'll give you an example of this. They're both semi-retired, and my father-in-law was caught speeding. Now, I don't know if you know this, I didn't know this, that if you're caught speeding and you choose to do the speed awareness course, that you have to do it in the town where you were caught as opposed to where you live, if it's different. They're based in the Midlands. He was caught speeding in Bournemouth. And my mother-in-law said to me, we've decided to make a weekend of it. Isn't that adorable? But I know getting older is no plain sailing. I know that there are problems along the way. One of my friends is in her 60s. Have we got any women who are 60 or above? Give us a cheer. A few of you, so maybe you can vouch if this is true or not. One of my friends, she's 62, and she said, there's something I need to tell you. I said, that sounds really serious. Is it serious? She said, well, I just don't want it to come as much of a surprise to you as it did to me. I said, okay, well, you better tell us what it is then. She said, when you get to my age, down there, instead of it being a lovely, healthy pink colour, I could have walked away right then and there. Whatever you've got, I don't want to know. Instead of it being a lovely, healthy pink colour, it's more of a slate grey. It's the detail that I love. She didn't say grey, she said slate grey. Like she'd had the Dulux colour chart out. Here, Terry, look at that. Do you think that's thunder or slate? I was so horrified by what I just learned that I blurted out, you mean like when meat's on the turn? Does that smell all right to you? Be a few handbag mirrors coming out when they get in tonight, I reckon. But my mum is nearly 70 and she's in a wheelchair, and sometimes people are mean to her because she's in a wheelchair, which is horrible and hurts all of us, but her especially. And I was trying to think of just some small way that she could retaliate when that happens to make her feel a little bit better, you know. And I was trying to teach her the cough swear thing. You know the cough swear thing? Arsehole. I was trying to teach her that. Because she's always so immaculately dressed and her nails are always perfect. And I thought nobody for a second would suspect. They'd be like, did that lady just? Did she just? Arsehole. Did she just? No, look at her nails. Get her a lozenge. So we talked about it, we laughed about it, we moved on in conversation. About 10 minutes later, I talked about something entirely different. And my mum said, I had to go to the doctors this week. I said, oh, is everything all right? She said, yeah, but I had to see the nurse. I said, oh, is that not good? She said, oh, it's the one I don't really like. I said, oh, never mind. She said, yeah, you know the one I think's a bit of a cunt. What have I done? She did the cough like it was a full stop. My family are hilarious. It's very good. We all know that it's good to laugh. It is good to laugh when you're with your friends or your family. We all know laughing does you good because it's medically proven to do you good, isn't it? It's medically proven to do you good because it gets all of your dolphins out. And you don't want them cooped up, do you? No. It's just cruel. But I'm lucky that I have very funny friends and family. And when I'm with my friends, it's amazing. So one of them will say something funny, somebody tops and I top it. It goes up and up and up and up. And it's great. But I've noticed recently one of my friends isn't really playing the game. And every time he says something, the whole lot comes crashing down and turns to shit. So what I do now, just before he says anything at all, I just go, bank. But I've never cheated on a boyfriend and I never would, but I think I found the acceptable face of adultery. I was sitting on a train on the aisle seat And a blind man got on, and he was using the tops of the chairs as sort of leverage to get along the carriage, understandably. And at one point, the train wobbled, and he lost his balance. And he put one hand firmly on me boob. And I let him. I even crossed over for when he came back from the loo. But we've started sort of spicing things up in the bedroom. There's different ways you can do this, as I'm sure you know. The first way you can do is you can have a shower. A nice couple lay at the front. Have you ever had a shower together? Oh, he thinks you might and she doesn't. Because the first thing I said to my fella, I said, you know what? He was going in the shower and I said, maybe I'd like some company. And he said, just give us 5 minutes till I've washed my arse. We have a shower, it always starts off really well, and then halfway through I realise this is just cleaning now, isn't it? There's nothing sexy going on anymore. It's when he says the words, arms up. But he is very thorough. Other things you can do, you can get dressed up as well. Got a nice couple in the middle here. Have you ever dressed up? Fella, have you ever dressed up like in an outfit? Or no, you haven't. How old are you guys?
38.
38, you see, because I stay a couple much older than you guys, so late 60s, early 70s, and you can always tell when a couple have been together too long. They had that sort of empty, sad, hollow expression. And what happens is, the way you can tell is when you ask them how long they've been together, and before they do a number, they always do a little horse impression. So you go, how long have you two been together? And they go... 30 years, 40 years, fuck knows. So I asked the old man, I said, have you ever dressed up like in an outfit or a uniform for sex? And he went, no. I looked at his good lady and I said, is there anything you'd like him to wear in bed? And she went, a shroud. But I also asked a young lad, much younger than you, sort of 16 or 17, I shouldn't have been talking to a 16-year-old boy about sex. But I just thought it would give us something to rub me button to later on. So everybody know, but people know what that is, don't they? Some people have different names for it. My friend said, what's rubbing your button? And I had to do a little action. And she said, oh, you mean checking your lettuce? I don't know what that is. But this young lad, 16-year-old, of course he'd never dressed up for sex. Just having sex is excellent. But I asked him if he was going to get dressed up, what would he dress up as? And he went... Fireman. Oh, Spider-Man. Although we're not talking about sex anymore, it's just pyjamas. I was going to say that I've dressed up, but I haven't really. It's slightly different. I was once on top, and he tried to put a sock on one of my boobs. It's not the same thing, is it? No girl ever wants to hear that her boobs are lovely and long. And it stayed on as well, and I wasn't sure whether to be pleased or not. Other things you can do, you can use food. What about, fella on the end, what kind of food do you think you could use in sex?
Ice cream.
Ice cream's a good answer. What about nice fella in a nice checky shirt? What kind of food do you think? Chocolate? Somebody shout cucumber. Ice cream and chocolate, and what about nice fella here? What kind of food do you think to use in sex?
Absolutely no idea.
Absolutely no idea. Oh, look at his wife's face. To be honest, she looks quite happy, like they haven't even needed that. We haven't got to that stage that you're at with your boyfriend of 5 years. Fuck off. I like asking fellas, because fellas come up with a wide variety of interesting answers. I've stopped asking ladies, no offence to the ladies, but ladies always say chocolate sauce, chocolate cream, fuck it, I'll put a Twix up there, whatever. As long as I can have a chocolate bag afterwards. But I asked a man recently what kind of food he had used in sex, and he said noodles. And I've had a bloke say chips and a bloke say curry, and I think generally men are picking things they're probably going to have for their tea anyway. Just using their partners as plates. But I asked an old man, couldn't resist, an old man in his 80s, I said, what kind of food do you think would be good to use? And he said ice cream, and ice cream's a good sort of classic answer. But it wasn't so much the answer he gave as the noise that he made while he was thinking. Because he went like this. What was he thinking while he did that noise? What goes well with vagina? Ice cream. My favourite answer was a guy just said cream. He said cream, but he went like that, like squirty. And I thought, well, obviously, you're not just going to spoon it at her. Hope she catches it in all the right places. Then he went like this. He went, pack her full. Oh. I'm so glad that you're as horrified as I was. Pack her full. To be fair, he was a plasterer. Just smooth that over. Not get any more bother from that crack. But the last thing you can do is you can do dirty talk on you. We thought we'd give it a go. We'd never done it to previous partners. We thought we'd give it a go. And I said, well, I'll start off, because I'm, an independent woman. I didn't do that. That'd be a really weird way of starting off, wouldn't it? I'm ready. And I didn't know what you're supposed to say, and I just went, ooh, I've been a bad girl. I'm sorry about that. And he just went, apology accepted. But recently I've had a bit more practice, and he started off and he went, you've been such a bad girl. But I think I'm going to have to punch you. He's gone too far there, hasn't he? But I misheard me and said punch, he said punish, which apparently entirely acceptable in terms of sexy lingo. But he hadn't really thought it through, because I said, what kind of punishment did you have in mind? He said, do the dishes.